I'm John Henry Westen. Thanks for joining me on Truth and Lies, the show where we work together to shed light on common misconceptions and come to a fuller understanding of the truth. In my work in media, I have found that it is essential to speak the truth with love. Love for all people, because we are all the children of God. And with that in mind, let's have a look at this week's topic. Well, the Catholic Church should stay out of the bedrooms of the nation. You've probably heard that one before, but let's take a moment to think about that. Do you agree? Do you disagree? And why? Is that your own opinion or the opinion of someone you know? Perhaps you've not had a chance to think about this before. Well, now is our chance to think about it, to talk about it, and to learn about it. Within this topic, there are many lies which have crept into our culture. I'm going to show you a few of those now, which we are going to address on this program.
Do you think there is anything wrong with contraception?
I think contraception is great and everyone should be able to get it.
Do you think contraception is important for women?
Contraception is a must these days if women want to have control over their own lives.
Is contraception good for women?
Contraception must be healthy and all for women. Doctors prescribe it to help with acne and hormonal issues after all.
Do you think there is a relationship between contraception and abortion?
Contraceptions must reduce the need for abortions.
What do you think is a benefit of condoms?
Everyone knows that condoms prevent sexually transmitted diseases.
What is a benefit to contraception?
I think it lets married couple have fulfilled sexual lives without having to worry about having kids when they don't want them.
Close to 39 million women in the United States alone use some form of contraception, with female sterilization, birth control pills, and condom usage being the most widely used methods. Other methods include hormonal injections, implants, intrauterine devices, and the birth control patch. Research at Ghent University in Belgium studied more than 1,000 women who had taken oral contraceptives for a period of time and then stopped. They found a 20 to 30% increase in the amount of plaque in the arteries for every decade the woman was on the pill. The results were presented at an American Heart Association meeting. Meanwhile, another study published by The Lancet confirmed previous findings that the risk of cervical cancer is higher in women who are on the pill. That risk drops back down to normal levels within 10 years of quitting the pill. Nearly 30 years ago, birth control pills were the be-all and the end-all of the sexual revolution. Free from the worries of pregnancy, women explored their sexuality. Only a few years passed before the pill began to lose its luster. Discoveries that high estrogen birth control pills contributed to breast cancer, embolism, and strokes made women think twice. Today, newer lower dosage birth control pills maintain high popularity, despite their continued serious health risks for women. Presently, 16 million American women are using birth control pills, fueling a $2.8 billion industry. Many become familiar with the pill in adolescence, either because of a desire for sexual intimacy or due to painful or irregular periods. The birth control pill, shots, and patches promote continuous high levels of estrogen in a woman's body. Science tells us this is dangerous. A woman's natural cycle is composed of rising and falling levels of estrogen and progesterone. Birth control pills work by keeping estrogen at a sufficiently high level that they fool the body into thinking it is pregnant, therefore another pregnancy cannot occur. To speak more about contraception and its effects, we have in the studio Ed Hoffner, Director of Marriage and Family Life for the Archdiocese of San Francisco, California.
So Ed, let's begin perhaps with a very common question. What is wrong with contraception anyway?
Yes, that's a great question. Most people think contraception is this great boon to society, and they had a story in Time magazine a couple years ago, 50 years of the pill. And I shuddered. I would argue that it does damage to a couple's relationship psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, and also physically. There are health risks associated with most people are not aware of. So where would you like me to start?
Well, why don't we start with the medical and health risks that most people aren't aware of?
Okay, sure. Well, first of all, most people don't read the warning label. So if you do that, I think that would scare people off right away. I've had friends, I don't want to do a lot of personal stories. I've had friends, women in their 30s that have had strokes. Women in their 30s aren't supposed to get strokes. Friends that have gotten tumors. When they saw the doctor who had prescribed it, the doctor said, gee, that happens sometimes. They weren't told this when they were given the drug. And of course, they didn't read the warning label. The contraceptive pill, which is the most common, increases the risk of cardiovascular disease. It increases the risk of cancers and increases the risk of stroke. And these are all documented medically. Those are the 3 leading causes of death among women. Wow. So right there, you've got that issue. When the contraceptive pill was first being developed, they didn't know about the dosage, and a couple of women actually died from it. And so they just lowered the dosage a little bit and put it on the market. Right now, the most popular contraceptive pill, I believe, was called Yaz or Yasmin, about 2-3 years ago. And there are over 10,000 lawsuits right now against that one particular form of contraception. We could go on and on. So one of the big problems with stroke is apparently what happens is it causes blood clots, thrombosis, and deep in the veins, and that can get lodged in the brain, is what causes stroke. So if you are a woman of childbearing age and you go to the ER with a stroke, which is not that common, but if you do, the first question they ask you is, are you on the pill? And if you say yes, they say you're not anymore. So it's contraindicated for people with strokes or potential cardiovascular diseases. Physicians aren't even supposed to prescribe it if you have those things coming in. Wow. So that's some of the problems.
Most physicians, though, are very regularly prescribing this.
Yeah, well, I love physicians. My dad's a physician. I grew up around physicians. But it's a big business. And I'm not saying that they're all motivated by profit, certainly. Although you'll remember that physicians in the 50s used to say cigarettes were great. And here, at least in California, we don't buy that anymore. But it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and I'm sure that influences some people's decisions. And most physicians, actually, medical science is not very good around female reproductive systems. Some of it's understood, but a lot of it just hasn't been studied that much. They give the pill out as kind of not as really treatment for the underlying problem, but as kind of masking the symptoms. So if women have recurring cysts or other things, and they'll give them the pill to kind of, they say regulate the cycle, really it's to suppress the fertility cycle. And so the health problem isn't addressed, but the symptoms go away, and so people are, quote, happy, unquote. So that's some of the problems.
So these are some of the physical problems, and I know that people can look them up. Actually, they can look them on the labels, as you mentioned. But you mentioned there's also, let's go to the psychological problems. What are some of the psychological problems?
I should mention one more thing, because I didn't bring this up. There's also environmental concerns. There's environmental concerns about all the chemicals that are going into our water stream. And people, again, in California at least, are much, much more aware of that these days. We don't want to pollute the environment. So I read an article in Science magazine, which is it's the leading popular magazine for all of science. It's actually fairly technical. And it was talking about the cost of cleaning contraceptives out of the water. They were talking about billions and billions of euros. It was an article written in England. And they were saying, because it's affecting the aquatic life. You're having all these amphibians and even some fish that are no longer male and female because of all the estrogen going into the water, the synthetic estrogen. So again, I have a chemistry background. Just very briefly, estrogen ordinarily would break down in your body. But the synthetic stuff has a triple bond between 2 of the carbon atoms. It makes it very stable because you don't want to have to keep taking the pill over and over. So you take this pill and the stuff doesn't break down. It does what it, quote, is supposed to do, but then it goes out into the water stream. And it does nothing in nature to break it down either. So the stuff builds up and builds up. So people that are concerned about the environment and concerned about their health might also want to think about that. Anyway, that was an aside.
Well, actually, an important side, because so you said that it's affecting the sexual characteristics of fish and stuff like that. do we know what it's doing in the human population? Because I presume this gets recycled again through drinking water, or
Yeah,
is
it does.
filtered?
There's some, and I'm not an expert in this because I haven't read it up, but there are some concerns that it might be causing women earlier and earlier to go into puberty because they're getting, again, these estrogen that they weren't expecting to.
You mentioned also that there are psychological, emotional concerns. What are those?
Yeah, well, I would say, I mean, the purpose of marriage in many senses is unity. It's a deep physical, spiritual, psychological, emotional unity.
Right.
Sexual union of the couple is the most, or arguably the most intimate form of communication they can have. So anything that's going to block that communication is going to damage that unity. It's going to damage that relationship. And I don't think couples go into this thinking we're going to contracept, we're going to harm our marriage. It's not intentional, but it has an unintentional side effect.
Well, okay, what do you mean by this this barrier? I guess with a condom in contraception, it's kind of obvious. There's a condom that's this
Right.
rubber barrier
Physical
between
barrier, yeah.
you and your wife. But how are you relating that to the pill or vasectomy or some other kind of sterilization?
Sure, that's a good question. Well, that also gets into the spiritual aspect, I would say. If we can talk about that, they tie together. So we read in the book of Genesis, God creates man in his image. What do we know about God? We know God is many, God is three, but God is also one. And we know that God is love. And it makes sense. The Holy Father talks about it in his Catechesis Theology of the Body, that it really makes sense that you have to have more than one person. God has to be more than one person if God's nature is love, because you need more than one person to have love. Then it goes on to verse, I think it's 19, I don't remember, when he creates the human person. So if the human person is created in the image of God, the human person is created for love. That's the fundamental nature. But God is a spirit. We're not spirit. We're spirit and matter. So God, in the next verse, it says, God creates man in his image, male and female. And when the two become one, that is an icon or an image of the life of the Blessed Trinity. And now we know God, out of that love of God, the Father for the Son for the Father, the Holy Spirit comes forth. This life, new life comes forward. And the same is supposed to be true of the couple. This intimate union of the two, new life is supposed to come forward. Whether or not there's physical life, there's always supposed to be love and life to come forward. Anything that blocks that in any way, whether it's a pill, whether it's vasectomy, whether it's a condom, is going to interfere with that union. It's going to interfere with that love coming forward. And so there's a deep, that's why the church teaches that use of contraception in any case is a serious matter. It's because it attacks the core of what marriage is, which is this union of husband and wife, this deep union that's supposed to remind us of and point to and be an icon of the Holy Trinity. So it's a severe problem, and it's so widespread among our Catholic couples. Most couples I know, they kind of have this vague idea the church has something to say, but they've never really been taught. I work with hundreds of married couples over the last 5 years. Most of them have never heard this.
Wow.
They're stunned to hear why. First of all, why the church teaches what it does, and a lot of them don't even know that. They just assume that, well, the church is old-fashioned, there's no good reason. You know, the whole Bible, if you read it, really is, well, if you read it, is a book about marriage. We begin with the marriage in the Genesis, we end with the marriage in the book of Revelation, the marriage of the Lamb, and all the way through the Old Testament, we have God speaking of espousing himself to his people, giving himself completely to his people Israel, who, by the way, are not very faithful. But God keeps giving himself and keeps giving himself. And then he sends his own son to show us how to love. And where was Jesus' first miracle?
The wedding of
Cana.
Yeah.
So marriage is God's image of, it's, my friend Katrina Zeno says, it's supposed to be like a preview of coming attractions. This is what heaven is going to be like, a little taste of it if you live it correctly. But if you're contracepting, then you're going off the rails and no longer an image of what God wants for you, that love that God wants, it becomes something else.
Well, a lot of people suggest that, this is necessary. Contraception is necessary because it gives women control over their own bodies.
Yeah, that's another one. The assumption is that if women might get pregnant, as if pregnancy is something bad, right? That's, in the schools, because I taught in the school system for a while, kids are taught nowadays that unprotected sex can either get you pregnant or a disease. And they're kind of similar. And I have a friend who said, I was in my mid-20s before I realized, no, sex gets you pregnant. Sex is designed for pregnancy. Sex is designed for child. But anyway, so the worst thing in the world in many people's minds is to have a child, but it's unplanned. In fact, our president, God bless him, made a comment that he wouldn't want one of his daughters to be punished by having a child out of wedlock. Anyway, so the assumption is that women need to be able to have sexual relations whenever they want without fear of getting pregnant. And that seemed to be a great good. And I would argue that's not. First of all, it encourages sexual relations. It encourages casual sexual relations. The problem is when you engage in sexual union with someone, a part of you goes into that person. I mean, in some cases physically, but certainly spiritually, emotionally, psychologically. You know, we tell our teenagers, you can use a condom, but you can't put a condom over your heart. So a part of you stays with that person. It's in Scripture, right? You know, St. Paul talks about that. So if you're having relations with all these different people, you're leaving parts of yourself all over the place. And it's diabolic. I was told, I don't speak Greek, I was told the Greek word diabolic comes from the word to scatter. And that's exactly what we're doing when we're so by encouraging women and men to have these casual relationships, we're fracturing ourselves psychologically, some cases physically. And also, you know, just from a practical point of view, contraception doesn't always work. So then the woman's going to get pregnant, not the man. Notice contraception is always focused on the woman. The guy just kind of does what he wants, right? It's always on the woman. Oh, this is good for you. Here, take this pill. So the woman couldn't get pregnant. The woman is most likely to get STDs, not the guy.
So there are all these health concerns. There are these psychological and emotional concerns. Let's delve into the spiritual concerns. We've already touched on those, but so what really is it spiritually about the pill, about all contraception, about sterilization? What is the church's message in this area?
Well, the church's message is that sexual union is this profound image or icon of the Trinity. It's supposed to represent the union of Christ and his church. And someone told me once, where would God be contracepting? I mean, if marriage is an icon of God relating to his people, how does contraception fit into that? I mean, where exactly would Jesus be? Or where would God be with the Israelites? What would be the analog of contraception? It would be just saying, I reject some part of you, I reject some part of you. And that's exactly what's happening. So anything that damages that unity, that spiritual unity that affects that is going to be spiritually damaging. And, at your wedding, you vow to be, and this is what Christ did. Christ came to us to show us how to love, and he gave his life freely. It says in the Gospel of John, he gave his life completely. He was faithful to the end, and new life comes out of that. So the acronym or the alliterative thing is freely, faithfully, fully, and fruitfully. And those are the same vows you take on your marriage, to be an icon of God to your spouse, to give your life freely, faithfully, fully, and fruitfully. Contraception blocks at least one of those. So every time you're contracepting, in a sense, you're breaking your marriage vows. One of my friends, Christopher West, said, how many times can the average marriage stand an act of unfaithfulness? I'm sure couples are not entering into this thinking, I'm being unfaithful, and yet that's what's happening, objectively happening every time you're using contraception. So, and we wonder why the divorce rate goes up.
Right, but how seriously does the church take this? We know in Catholic teaching that, we have venial sins, we have mortal sins, and God forbid that those are sins that actually separate us from Christ in a very real way, such that if we die in that state without being repentant, without going to confession and so on, we actually risk eternal damnation.
This is grave matter. We talk to our couples, many of them they know the church kind of disapproves of it, but the church states unequivocally in the encyclical Humanae Vitae that it's absolutely prohibited to engage in anything that will directly affect the process of conception. It's directly intended to do that. So any form of contraception, sterilization, which is very common too, using the pill, using a condom. There's other ways as well. Any of those things that directly prevents God's plan for marriage. Remembering again, God's plan for marriage is sort of the icon of what heaven's going to be like, is very grave matter. So it's a mortal sin. Sexual union, human life is sacred. How do we get human life? through sexual union. Therefore, the means by which God creates new human life, which is sacred, are also sacred. So to directly attack that is grave matter. It's a mortal sin. And marriage, and children especially, allow us to purify ourselves if we're open to that, to learn to be less selfish, to learn to be more loving, to learn to be more giving, to learn to be more Christ-like. If you understand what the church is guided by the Holy Spirit, is God's voice to us here on earth. So keep the church out of my bedroom is basically saying keep God out of my bedroom. And couples that use natural family planning typically find that once they start using it, they stop focusing on themselves so much and start listening to God better. And sometimes they're called to have more children. Sometimes they're not. God speaks to each of us differently.
Media is powerful. It can change a culture. It can change a whole generation. It can impact the entire globe.
2 years ago, Shalom World TV was a dream. Today, it's a reality. A commercial-free, high-definition television network broadcasting from the United States of America, reaching 375 million English-speaking people around the globe. We want to reach to the ends of the earth. Throughout the year, Shalom missionaries work day and night to accomplish this mission, to produce programs that evangelize the culture.
What is wrong with contraception?
Tonight on Seekers.
I can make time for you.
For divine knowledge.
We want to continue this mission. We want to produce more programs to impact this generation positively.
Will you be with us? Can you take a commitment of donating just $25 a month for the next 12 months? We assure you of our prayers. Visit shalomworld.org/donate today. We thank you for your generosity.
When you engage in sexual union with someone, a part of you goes into that person. I mean, in some cases physically, but certainly spiritually, emotionally, psychologically. So every time you're contracepting, in a sense, you're breaking your marriage vows. Sexual union, human life is sacred. How do we get human life? Through sexual union. Therefore, the means by which God creates new human life, which is sacred, are also sacred.
Here we're talking about contraception, about the subject is keep the church out of the bedrooms of the nation, which relates mostly to this act in this area. But you're saying that it affects physically, health-wise. It affects psychologically and emotionally. But then spiritually is mortal, grave, is potential damnation. So if you're a couple and you actually love one another, you're risking hurting them physically. You're risking hurting them psychologically. But what makes all of that pale in comparison, you're risking harming them eternally. That's insane. How can there ever be a concept of love when you're doing something to a person that could be so damaging as to never recover from?
Well, it's the exact opposite of what you promised. I promised to give myself completely to this person and to basically to help get them to heaven. And instead, you're kind of pushing them the other way. So that phrase, keep the church out of my bedroom, if you understand what the church is guided by the Holy Spirit, is God's voice to us here on earth. So keep the church out of my bedroom is basically saying keep God out of my bedroom. We say God is love. Basically saying let's keep love out. I don't know what's going on in the bedroom, but it's not love. Again, subjectively, a lot of people may not be aware of this. They may have good intentions or not so bad intentions, but objectively this is happening. It doesn't matter if if I intend to drink this and you put poison in it or not. I mean, it's going to have the same effect on me. And so this is poisoning the soul of, I would say, millions of our Catholics. And again, we wonder why families are struggling so much.
Amazing. Even once that is sort of grasped, today's culture has a lot of pressure for the acceptance of contraception. And one of the big arguments actually plays on another area of morality which a lot of Catholics are concerned about. Because we hear all the time, especially from Planned Parenthood, well, contraception reduces the need for abortion, therefore don't you want it? And I think that actually sways a lot of people. Oh yeah, gee, we don't want abortion, so you need to have contraception. So how do you respond to that?
Well, a couple ways. I mean, first of all, you can just track statistically as the contraception rate increased in the late 50s, early 60s, the abortion rate increased even. And then once it was legalized, it skyrocketed. But in the United States alone, I've looked this up, there's 3 million unplanned pregnancies every year. With the best contraception we have available, it's universally available. You know, the HHS mandate notwithstanding, anybody can get contraception. High school kids can get stuff from the, don't get me started on that. So you can get it anywhere, and we still have 3 million unplanned pregnancies every year. Planned Parenthood counts on the fact that it's going to fail because it drives their big business, which is abortion.
Right.
So we in the United States alone abort half of those unplanned pregnancies every year, 1.5 million. I have a friend that did some accounting for Planned Parenthood once, and she told me, this still chills me. She said, you know, in a business, you project income by your most stable product. So she said they did their revenue predictions based on how many abortions they assumed they would do the following year.
Wow.
So it's a business. You know, if abortion wasn't a big business, we wouldn't hear that much about it. I mean, we still, but Planned Parenthood would not be pushing contraception.
Wow.
But contraception drives the failure of contraception. The statistics are the best contraception, if used absolutely correctly every time, is going to fail a small percentage of the time, 2 or 3 times. But the typical use rate, depending on what it is, it fails anywhere from 10 to 30% of the time. That's typical. Now, let's imagine 2 teenagers who are probably don't even know each other, and so maybe the failure rate's going to go up to 30%, 40%, and that's the abortion business. So I would say it's the exact opposite. I mean, statistically, you can show that the contraception actually drives abortion, not the other way around. It doesn't reduce it at all.
The idea that this is needed so people can have fulfilled sexual lives.
Wow.
Where do you take that?
Well, again, it depends what you mean by fulfilled sexual lives. If you mean that you're going to make lots of money, travel to exotic places, and have sex whenever you want, that's one kind of fulfillment. I would argue that's not very fulfilling. Again, talking to a lot of people who have lived that life and said, this is pretty empty. The idea behind that, though, is somehow children in this culture, you know, I love going to Mexico. I don't want to pick on Mexico, but I love going to Mexico because you just have this sense of family culture. In a lot of traditional cultures, you have this sense of family. I felt the same. I was in India recently. I felt the same way. But in the United States, and especially in the Western United States, you have this idea that children are somehow oppressive or almost a punishment. They're like this big drain. They're a financial drain. It costs $500,000 to raise a child or some outlandish figure. And we're sold this relentlessly. So the idea is you can't have children because once you have children, your fulfillment will go away. Now, most parents I know will say, yeah, kids are a lot of work. In fact, the second sentence I was looking up before the show, Humanae Vitae, says, children often entail great difficulty and hardship. However, they are the source of the greatest joy within a marriage. So most parents I know that have had unexpected children, which still happens, they say, this child was a blessing. This child changed my life. We were talking about this before the show too. You know, most of us, or many of us, think we're pretty decent people. You know, we always think we're pretty, you know, we could be better, but we're pretty good. We're probably in the B+ range, right? You know? And then we get involved with someone in a relationship. We get married, and we have this mirror in front of us. We say, oh, maybe I'm not quite as unselfish as I thought, but I'm still doing pretty good. Okay, maybe I'm a B-. And then you have children, and you realize, boy, I'm pretty selfish. It's focused on me. And if we think about it, the purpose of marriage is the union of the couple to prepare us for heaven, but it's also, frankly, to kind of scrub away some of those imperfections so we can spend less time in purgatory. Because nothing unrighteous can stand before God. We don't want to stand before God if we're unrighteous. And marriage, and children especially, allow us to purify ourselves if we're open to that, to learn to be less selfish, to learn to be more loving, to learn to be more giving, to learn to be more Christ-like. So aside from the fact that children actually are a lot of fun much of the time, along with the work, they make us holy. They give us a chance to prepare ourselves for heaven. So I would argue the exact opposite. You know, not every couple is able to have children. All couples are called to be spiritually fruitful, but children, physical children, give you so many opportunities for growth and for truly being fulfilled, to truly be, you know, we all want to be more loving if it's not too much work. So with children, you kind of can't get out of the work, but you do have that opportunity to really become a loving person. So I would say that that's a completely false statement.
Contraceptives work by one or a combination of methods. Some pills prevent ovulation, others prevent implantation of a fertilized egg in the endometrium or lining of the uterus. Still others thicken the mucus around the cervix, making it difficult for sperm to penetrate. There is even a new brand of birth control pill on the market that boasts women can safely have a period only 4 times a year, or they can avoid having periods altogether for years at a time without a break from the estrogen blast. We certainly do not know everything about estrogen or estrogen dominance, as it is called when estrogen levels remain high without being balanced by progesterone. But among the effects we do know are increased risk of breast cancer, increased risk of blood clotting, heart attack and stroke, migraines, gallbladder disease, increased blood pressure. In addition, the use of antibiotics has been shown to decrease the effectiveness of birth control pills. What is not usually mentioned or even known is that the metabolism of birth control pills by the liver requires extra amounts of B-complex vitamins, vitamin C, magnesium, and zinc. That means if a woman is taking birth control pills for years at a time, as are most American women, they have nutrient deficiencies. Weight gain, fluid retention, mood changes, depression, and even heart disease can all arise from nutrient imbalance. In addition to all this, the continuous use of birth control pills, like the new no-period pill, has not been sufficiently studied. Women who use these methods are essentially test subjects. There is no telling what the long-term effects of daily hormones will do to fertility or other aspects of a woman's health. Unnatural choices have unnatural consequences, both for a woman and the environment. The choice of contraception is a personal one, and in a world full of modern medical technology, many have been taught that taking a pill is the answer to any health problem. However, the human body is still connected to Mother Nature in a way that science does not fully recognize. Women especially may often feel this connection because of their menstrual cycles. Dr. Michael Smolensky's research on circadian rhythms, a biological cycle lasting 24 hours, and the sleep-wake patterns found that our words menstruation, moon, and month all come from the Greek word for measure of time. A woman's menstrual cycle runs its course in about 28 days, one lunar cycle. Periods usually start spontaneously in the week of the full moon in women not using birth control pills or hormone replacement therapy, particularly those with ample exposure to natural daylight and dark cues. Dr. Smolensky's research discovered that when more bright lights were used at night, the less regular his female subjects' periods were. Human bodies were created to follow the natural flow of light and darkness. Health of mind, body, and spirit often means getting back to the basics and closer to Mother Nature. This leads to a call for women to make wiser and natural choices for birth control in order not to adversely affect their long-term health.
There is also a popular misconception. There's a lot of talk sometimes about, well, Catholics and contraception. Yeah, they say we shouldn't do it, but they actually have their own version, this NFP thing that they all talk about. And isn't it just sort of like Catholic contraception?
Yeah, so some people think we talk about artificial contraception and then natural family planning is natural contraception. That's not the case at all. So contraception are things that act against life. So you have an active, at least psychologically, you're trying to prevent conception. Natural family planning is it's very interesting. The modern methods, so first of all, it's not the rhythm method. That was the best technology in the 1930s, and it went out in the 1950s. So do you use a cell phone from the 1950s? Right. So natural family planning is a very modern, very up-to-date method. And basically what happens is a woman, typically the couple, not just the woman, would go through training and look for certain biological markers, biological signs that every woman has. Most women don't know what they are or what they indicate. It's very interesting. I've even some friends of mine who are nurses say they took this training and said, yeah, I had no idea. So these very common signs, and they're not hard to learn with a little bit of training. You take a few classes, and the woman can tell when she's fertile. And the man's usually either fertile or not fertile. Most of the time he's fertile. So then the couple, their combined fertility gets discussed. So every month there's a discussion. Gee, is this a time that we are open to new life? This is a good time for us? Or is there some serious reason to potentially postpone a pregnancy? If it's not a good time for whatever reason, it's a significant reason, then the couple would abstain from the marital relations. And I've been told by couples that this actually, so you kind of creates you're almost like you're dating again. You know, you have to figure out other ways to show your love for your spouse. And then when you come back together, it's almost like this honeymoon effect. So my friends say it's almost like we have a honeymoon every month, which is this really, again, great way for building unity. So natural family planning is this methodology of learning when you're fertile, and then having a discussion, the couple, not just the guy say, it's your problem, honey, take care of it, which sadly happens. But the couple makes a discussion and talks about whether or not this is a good time for them to be open to a possible pregnancy. So that's very different from saying, no, we're going to engage in sexual relations and we're going to actively prevent that from happening. So if you ask these two couples, if you say there's no difference, you say, well, why don't you switch? The couple is contraceptive, say, oh, no, that'd be completely different. So they get it, even though they won't admit it. If you ask the couple who's using natural family planning, the typical response I would get is, that's disgusting. Why would I do that to my wife? Or why would I do that to my spouse? It's so psychologically different and physically different, but most importantly, spiritually very different. One is open to life if God chooses, and one is not. And you have this. My friend said it's kind of like throwing a birthday party and sending out invitations to people saying, you're not invited, you're not invited. You know, we don't want a child here. Whatever happens, no child. And if we do get pregnant, we're probably gonna have to take care of that child. Yeah, very different.
It is, though, an immediate answer to all of the health risks you talked about before, to the emotional barrier, if you will, as well.
And promotes unity.
Absolutely. I think that with natural family planning, the proof is actually in the pudding. The stats on the health of families that practice, the health in terms of staying together, and in terms of family accord rather than discord. Are you familiar with those?
Yeah, as far as I know, there are not a lot of real hardcore studies done because basically there's not a lot of money for it. I know in California, the Couple League did a study and they looked at 1,100 couples over a 25-year period. And those 1,100 couples that were practicing and actually teaching natural family planning over 25 years, there were, I want to say 14 divorces, either 14 or 19 divorces.
Out of 1,100?
Yeah, so very, very low incidence. And you can't say, well, this causes this, but the statistics everywhere I see the couples that use natural family planning, that the figure I usually hear is maybe 2, 3, 4% divorce rate, usually around 2%. It'd be nice to do a study on it and see. But I think the fact that you have this intimate communication, not just physically, but you're actually discussing, very intimate matters, that opens the doors to all other kinds of communication. And communication is just a key to bringing a couple together.
Absolutely. Well, I think you have very successfully given us the material that really does debunk a lot of these myths that are very, very common. Thank you. Thank you so much for being with us, Ed.
Thank you.
If people want more information, if they want to get more information from you or learn more about this subject area, where can they do that?
Some resources? One very good book by Ignatius Press. It just came out a year ago. I think it's called Adam and Eve After the Pill. And it talks about the effects on men, women, children, children of the fallout of all this. So that's one very good book. So a lot of resources on theology of the body, Pope John Paul II's Catechesis. And one that I particularly like is called Men and Women Are From Eden. And it just talks, it explains it in, the original is like this thick. This is much, much more readable and much more interesting. There's also an organization that sells a lot of materials and talks a lot about the value of natural family planning and the benefits of it. It's called One More Soul. So they have a website, onemoresoul, probably.com, and they would also be a great resource.
Beautiful. Remember that Ed Hoffner is available through the Archdiocese of San Francisco, As well, the teaching of the Catechism of the Catholic Church on this subject is very important. You can find that reference in the Catechism at 2366. Also, there is a very famous CD on the subject called Contraception, Why Not? It's been around for a long time. It was by Dr. Janet Smith, and it's still very, very good. So, my friends, once again, we have been given a wealth of information, facts that prove the truth that comes from God and is taught by His Church. Have your opinions shifted during the course of our discussions? Are you feeling more ready now to answer those tough questions that people have? It's my hope that you are. Remember that in the scriptures we are told God's very first commandment to mankind in Genesis 1:28, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. These are beautiful, beautiful teachings that come straight from God. We want to hear from you here at Truth and Lies. Tell us what other topics we should cover. You can do that at #TruthAndLies and visit us online at shalomworld.org/truth-and-lies. Until next time, my friends, go forth and share the truth with love. God bless you.